Now, I love to listen to true crime videos, campfire stories, and podcasts about the strange, spooky, and sinister. Probably more than most, and definitely more than I should. But sometimes your noggin needs a break from all that. So, I decided to tell my own non-scary stories and share them here with all of you. Consider this your safe space to relax, listen, learn, and maybe even drift off to sleep. So settle in, wind down, and cuddle up. And welcome to Non-Crime Storytime. Welcome or welcome back. Come on in. Get comfy. You can close your eyes if you want. And let me tell you a story. This one's called Blood, Bullets, and Biceps. So, what are you looking to get done? The man responded with a bright, warm smile, catching the other set of eyes in the mirror. Oh, just a trim, please. His thick African accent immediately made the barber curious. Great accent, man. Where are you from? He asked, beginning his usual prep routine. I'm from Ghana, in West Africa. Nice. You in town on business? Manhattan honked behind them in her usual symphony as the barber arranged his tools. Yes, I work in the film industry, replied the man. Awesome. I'm originally from LA myself. The man's eyes gleamed in the mirror with excitement. You're from Los Angeles? Do you know any famous movie stars? The barber broke into a light laugh as he gently shook his head, focusing his eyes on the man's hairline. Unfortunately, no. Slightly resigned, the man cheeked. That's too bad. I was hoping you knew Arnold or Stallone. They were my heroes as a kid. The barber's hands carefully pulled away as his head hinged back in laughter. Me too. I used to love playing Rambo with my brothers in the backyard. The man's eyes floated up as he fondly remembered, my favorite Stallone was Cobra, when he shot all those bad guys and rode off on the motorcycle. So cool. I was surprised there were no snakes in the movie, though. The man's eyes met the barber's in the mirror again, and the barber quietly smiled, appreciating the play on words. The man asked the barber, So, what's your favorite Stallone? The barber's smile gave way to a shrug as he admitted, I mean, it's gotta be First Blood. Unoriginal, I know, but it's the best. The man's smile nearly warmed the entire room. Oh, my village loves First Blood to this day. It's amazing, there's so much action, all those bullets and traps and sprinting across the jungle. Stallone was just as strong on screen as he was on the poster. Tracing invisible abs across his shirt, the barber agreed. Bro, Stallone was crazy shredded, insane muscles. As the barber leaned in to carefully taper the man's sideburns, he heard the man offer quietly, Sadly, no snakes. Turning away to wipe his razor, the barber's eyes rambled over the white towel as he tried hard to silently recall. Were there any snakes in Rambo? Should there have been snakes in Rambo? Turning back to the man for his final shape-up cuts, the barber's brain politely changed the subject. So, did Ghana get all the same movies we did? The man's eyes stayed closed as he spoke, reminiscing fondly on his home. No, we do movies a little different in Ghana. But I've always loved movies, even the scary ones. My brothers loved Freddy and Jason, but my favorite horror picture is Silence of the Lamb. The barber's face reflexively inched back to see the man's eyes, still confidently closed and relaxed, as he awaited his hot towel. Walking to and from the towel warmer, the barber went nearly dizzy in thought. Did he just say Silence of the Lamb? Holding the hot towel gently in place, the barber's lips wandered along with his bewildered eyes, running in nearly manic silent circles. Isn't it Silence of the Lambs? Pulling the towel away, the barber collected his twisted face just in time for the man to open his eyes and let out a resigned sigh. With a regretful tilt of his head, the man gave a third. There were no snakes in that one either. The barber's spinning thoughts gave way to the spinning of the chair, his eyes meeting the man's without the mirror for the first time. Okay, I gotta ask, what's with the snakes? The man looked up at the barber, confused. You keep saying that. Cobra, Rambo, Silence of the Lamb? That they didn't have enough snakes? The man's face stayed calm and confident as he explained, "Well, considering the poster." "What poster?" "The movie poster for Silence of the Lamb, and the others. I just thought the movie would have more snakes." With a confused squint, the barber pulled out his phone and with a quick search, found the movie poster for Silence of the Lambs. Seeing the minimalist, black and white, moth-faced image, the barber's brow relaxed. Turning the phone to show the man, he said, "Look, here's the poster for Silence of the Lambs. It didn't have a snake on it, just the moth." The man's eyes rounded as he smiled at the screen, confusing the befuddled barber even further. The barber's frantic fingers scrolled to show him the others. Look, neither did Rambo or Cobra. No snakes. With a kind and knowing laugh, the man politely asked, "May I please borrow your phone?" Watching cautiously from behind, the barber's eyes narrowed as he watched the man type Ghana at the end of the search bar. Without even previewing the results, the man returned the phone to the barber's still open hand. The barber's eyes grew into dazzled saucers as they darted from the phone to the man and back again, who let out a hearty laugh. "I told you we'd do movies a little different in Ghana." And now, the rest of the story. With nearly 35 million inhabitants, Ghana is the second most populous country in West Africa. Its modern and historic artistic exports of fashion, textiles, music, dance, literature, and film tell the stories of Ghana's powerful ancestry, indomitable spirit, and boundless creativity. West Africa's pre-colonial kingdoms were a time of great prosperity, boasting West Africa's earliest institutional educational system, a universal writing script, and gender-inclusive military and civil infrastructure. But in the 15th century, Europeans began contesting the Western African coast for trading rights, until Great Britain ultimately established control and placed the region officially under the Commonwealth, renaming it the British Gold Coast. But in 1957, under President Kwame Nkrumah, Ghana became the first colony in sub-Saharan Africa to achieve sovereignty and served as an inspiration for global decolonization efforts and the Pan-African movement. However, Nkrumah led an authoritarian regime wherein he repressed all political opposition, enforced strict censorship over the media, and fervently worked to maintain a one-party system. From the 1960s through the end of the 20th century, military leaders rose and fell through violent coups and occupations that lasted anywhere from a few weeks to several years. Enduring political turbulence led Ghana's leaders into a nearly persistent state of paranoia, wherein the media was closely policed and heavily censored, all in hopes of squashing any potential uprisings before they could even begin. Mass messaging in any medium was required to be fully vetted by, and unmistakably in support of, Ghana's one-party government. Before the 1980s, the Ghanaian government was the only producer of films in the country. Often, this meant most films in circulation were official public service and educational films only. Meanwhile, the late 1970s and early 1980s in America was a fast-paced time of technological innovation, and where film and television were creating narratives with more creativity, color, and controversy than ever before. While primetime soaps like Dallas and Hill Street Blues reinvented dramatic storytelling on television, movies like the Star Wars trilogy and E.T. mesmerized viewers of all ages. Movies were quickly becoming immersive cinematic experiences with increasingly intense stories, inventive direction, and cinematography. Hollywood was braving a new frontier of unabashed content and characters with films like Alien, The Shining, and The Evil Dead, as heroes, monsters, stunts, and romances dominated big and small screens alike. But in Ghana, things weren't quite as shiny as Hollywood celluloid. As new leader, Flight Lieutenant Jerry John Rawlings took power in 1981, political, economic and natural forces weighed hard on Ghana. That year, the worst drought in modern Ghanaian history began, creating widespread food shortages and devastating bushfires across Ghana and its borders that would last over 2 years. In 1982, an attempted coup against Rawlings' new government was sniffed out and stifled, and all found to be involved were promptly rounded up and executed. In 1983, as the drought continued, Nigeria forced almost 1 million Ghanaians out of Nigeria and back to Ghana in fear that Nigerian jobs and overall welfare were being compromised by the presence of Ghanaian immigrants. Even before these million refugees arrived, Ghana's foreign exchange reserves were already almost entirely depleted, and the country's per capita income had dropped by almost half. Food, jobs, and morale were becoming harder and harder to find. Since its debut in the late 19th century, the cinema, even in its most primitive days, has always delivered more than just entertainment. Film provides audiences with both escapade and escape. Film creates empathy by lending viewers a new perspective so they may, even if just for a moment, see the world in a completely different light. Film inspires big ideas and soothes deep wounds, tickling our brain's most sensitive nerves, the urge to learn and the need to feel. And all the while, cinematic experiences give us emotional catharsis. Laughter when it's funny, tears when it's sad, anger at the villains, fear of the monsters, the thrill of victory, and the agony of the eventual credit roll. And as cinemagoers, we become community. We watch, we feel, and live these deeply human experiences together. 1918 shoulder arms gave Allied civilians a rose-colored glance into the theaters of World War I, soothing cinemagoers' war-torn souls in Chaplin's signature slapstick style. 1934's The Thin Man allowed depression-worn American audiences to spend what may be their last Buffalo nickel and be magically transported into the lavish lives of Nick and Nora, even if for only an hour and a half. In the 1960s, everything from adventure sagas with gritty anti-heroes to family-friendly tear-jerker sing-along films provided distraction from anything the nightly news might bring next: the good, the bad, and the ugly. And in the decades since, film has become an art form with something for everyone. Film elicits every emotion and explores every experience, from the most mundane to the most extraordinary. And in the 1980s, audiences' opportunities to immerse and escape through cinema became more available than ever with the creation of the video home system, VHS. While American audiences had VHS distribution readily available through rental and retail stores, the country of Ghana was still under the watchful eye of a media-wary government, and cinemas were geographically and cost-prohibitive to most working-class citizens. But soon, necessity gave way to invention, and the mobile cinema was born. When VHS tapes burst onto the global scene in the 1980s, Ghanaian entrepreneurs developed the small-scale distribution model of the mobile cinema, wherein a local or traveling operator would show movies to a crowd using a television powered by a portable diesel generator, often in areas without any electricity, which played a VHS copy of a recent or recently acquired film. Screenings were held wherever crowds could safely and somewhat comfortably gather, such as open-air markets, outside closed businesses, or behind hotels. Many operators packed in viewers on wooden benches or floor seating, and often to standing-room-only crowds. Featured film genres included Hollywood action and horror, low-budget American B-movies, Bollywood films, martial arts movies, and Ghanaian and Nigerian features. The mobile cinema was not only a cultural cornerstone of Ghanaian entertainment in the 1980s and 1990s, but also served as a lucrative business venture for entrepreneurs, who called these underground operations video clubs. Some of Ghana's most historic video clubs include Bombay, JK, Manso, Name, Princess, Pall Mall, Royal Gate, and many others. By the 1990s, audience demand for films was high, so competition between the clubs became fierce. For the most part, every club was working with the same variables. Showings were in a crowded room with a small TV showing a VHS copy of a film in another language. So audiences craved entertainment that was understandable in any language. Horror and action films nearly always outperformed comedies because a great deal of English-speaking comedy relies on turn of phrase and wordplay. So if it had to be visually or audibly discerned, it wouldn't appeal like something that made a definitive statement that everyone could see and hear. The name of the game was Blood, Bullets, and Biceps. Mix that with the occasional topless scene or a supernatural scare, and the screening was usually a success. But with this secret formula being not so secret to competing operators, each video club needed to do something to set them apart and put more butts in seats. Soon, advertising became a key player in both the business model of the mobile cinema and Ghanaian cinema culture as a whole. Operators needed to attract everyone, from busy pedestrians to cars flying wildly down dusty roads. And with no access to printing tools or supplies, the operators had to, yet again, get a little inventive. The main advertising medium in Ghana at the time was hand-painted signs. Some local shops only needed simple signs to display their goods, services, specials, and sales, but Ghana's local visual artists, most of which labeled themselves as sign painters, got to flex their creative and technical muscles for one clientele in particular: hair salons. The 80s and 90s certainly had no shortage of memorable hair fads. Hair salons worked hard to stay up to date on their offerings and the signs they used to advertise them. These salon owners frequently commissioned local artists to paint highly detailed, lifelike portraits on outdoor signage to advertise the newest styles of the time. Combining this lifelike portraiture, contemporary color palettes, not to mention new and inventive haircuts and braid designs, as well as typography, these vibrant, colorful signs became and stayed an integral part of the visual DNA of cities and villages across West Africa. Once video clubs decided to advertise, operators knew hand-painted signs were the way to go. But as in all new endeavors, you've got to do the best you can with what you've got. And sometimes, what is born out of that ingenuity becomes an art form all its own. To meet the need of large-scale signage, defy the authoritarian restrictions on printing and materials, and create weather-resistant advertisements, artists sewed together empty flour sacks to use as canvases. By utilizing this commonly found, and usually discarded, material, operators' investments and profiles could stay low. In addition, artists were able to begin working as soon as they, and their easily attainable materials, were ready. The artists creating these posters often used oil-based or acrylic paints, which require extensive knowledge, practice, and patience to use effectively. Artistic techniques like tonal underpainting, anatomical structure, and life drawing, as well as design skills of composition, framing, and typography, were all needed to create these posters. It should be noted that even in modern Western art as a trade, most singular artists do not have expertise in all these aspects simultaneously. Textile curator and collector Karun Thakar told BBC many of the artists who created movie posters were well-trained and did 3 to 4 year apprenticeships. They spent several days on each artwork. This new, exciting endeavor demanded time, dedication, and passion from these self-labeled sign painters, and each confidently and creatively tackled the challenge. Bring to life Hollywood, Bollywood, Nollywood, and Gollywoods, already larger-than-life stories, through paintings that would bring cinema to the people. But more importantly, would bring people to the cinema. So, what makes these posters so special? Well, let's take a look at how they're made. First, an artist must be selected, and, as in any art form, the artist's interpretation and influence is what gives art its voice. Poster collector, curator, and dealer Brian Chankin estimates there were probably more than 75 artists making these posters in their heyday. Next, materials. Because of the use of flour sacks as canvases, these paintings can vary greatly in size, depending on what the video club operators and artists felt was right. But one thing is nearly universal. These posters are huge. Final versions of some Ghanaian movie posters range in size from 55 to 70 inches high, taller than some of the artists who created them. Large, durable, and visually arresting, these paintings helped operators do their best to sell out screenings. Then, once the screening was over, the posters could be easily rolled up, transported, and unrolled in the next village. Lastly, and possibly most important of all, artists and operators had to select the poster's contents. And here's where the posters start to take their signature shape. Some design elements were universal. Bright colors, large renderings of a title, representations of some plot devices, the showing's location, and the artist's signature. If you look even closer, you may be able to make out some of the flour bags details underneath the painting. Early artists like Leonardo, Mr. Nana, and D.A. Jasper, who pioneered the art form, set the standard for the poster's most common thematic elements, highlighting the film's characters, plot devices, special effects, and most memorable scenes in a way that would, above all else, sell tickets, even if what was shown wasn't perfectly aligned with the film's actual plot. Collector and curator of Ghanaian art, Ernie Wolf describes this time as the Golden Age, describing these artworks as, quote, hand-painted, imagination-driven movie posters. And being imagination-driven, in some cases, was a necessity, because sometimes the artists were painting posters for films they had yet to see. Even in the 1990s, American video stores had their limits on what was available to customers. So, in areas further away from Hollywood's front door, copies of new releases were very difficult to come by. So, scraping context from the film's box art, hearsay, or even just working off the title alone, the artists created advertising for the film as they imagined it. Or even better, as an unforgettable cinematic adventure audiences would be happy to pay for and afraid to miss. Some artists had seen the films beforehand, but not all of them were quite up to snuff. With the artist's imagination, that is. If a film lacked enough action, special effects, or, in general, the aforementioned blood, bullets, and biceps, artists would plus up the poster's plot with a few extra details. I sometimes watch the movies and pick some actions from it, says Heavy J, an artist who owns a studio in Teshi near Ghana's capital, Accra. But if a movie was boring, then I had to do it by my own imagination, which mostly features some images and actions that were not in the movies, to attract more people to go watch them. Journalist Pierre de Villiers describes, instead of blindly copying the poster art of Hollywood and Bollywood, painters used artistic license, embellishing scenes from the movie or sometimes adding random, eye-catching elements. A big, red, leaping fish might steal James Bond's thunder on the Spy Who Loved Me poster. The ever-popular Rambo could invade a Mad Max artwork, and Halloween's Michael Myers might have a cobra wrapped around his neck, all to get customers through the door. And it is at this junction, where creativity, imagination, and technical expression combine, that these posters gain their buzzworthy flair and undeniable charm. Action films, particularly popular in Ghanaian video clubs, often had posters with what CNN calls a garish, exuberant style, full of muscles, blood, and exaggerated features. Action stars already muscled up on camera are painted, quite literally, larger than life, sporting gains, guns, and gravitas that even their real-life counterparts could only hope to match. Horror films often followed suit, with Hollywood heroes replaced with villains, ranging from men and monsters to the downright demonic. Artists would often combine cultural tropes of witchcraft and the supernatural with the universal language of blood and body horror, knowing that shock value may also give way to the most effective advertisement medium of all, word of mouth. A familiar favorite trope was the artist's inclusion of snakes, even in posters for films where they may not belong. Ghanaian and Nigerian films have always been cinematic celebrations of West Africa's love, passion, and creativity. Accordingly, the posters created for locally sourced films take on the same dramatic flair as Hollywood blockbuster films, but pay homage to the film's uniquely Ghanaian heart, story, and message. By the mid-1990s, television and home video became more widely available, which led to the mobile cinema model going nearly extinct by the new millennium. As such, the need and budget for advertising died off, and the art form of the painted movie poster declined with it. Sadly, some of Ghana's most successful and talented poster artists were forced to abandon their art altogether and moved on to other, more financially reliable trades. Karun Thakar told BBC in 2019, "I spoke to Joe Mensa recently, and he's now working as a car mechanic. So many of these amazing artists have gone back to doing ordinary jobs, which is tragic." But the art and its impact remains. Video club films, and the art that advertised them, inspired far more in Ghana than just ticket sales. Kowa Ansa produced Ghana's first independent film, Love Brewed in the African Pot, in 1981. It remains one of West Africa's most influential and beloved films. D.A. Jasper, one of Ghana's most revered movie poster artists, cites it as his favorite African film of all time. As video cassettes made their way into more hands, Ghana's people weren't just watching movies, they were making them. Beginning in 1986, Ghana was the first country in the world to use VHS cameras to shoot feature-length films, which would deliver Ghanaian and African stories through the eyes of Africans. Whether through the degradation, loss, or taping over of master cassettes, many of these films have been lost to time. And tragically, so too have many of Ghana's classic film posters. By the very nature of the video club business, video club posters were created to endure a hard life. They were folded or rolled for transport, displayed in and exposed to the elements for weeks to months on end, which led to most being worn, damaged, or destroyed by transit, sun, or water damage before being archived. But the posters that have survived are, in effect, a visual time capsule. By the year 2000, Ghana and West Africa was a vibrant land bursting with creative, political, and economic growth. And as much as Western films posters are an homage to Hollywood culture, Ghanaian posters' juxtaposition of familiar faces with their intentionally imaginative style represents Ghana's confident ability to stand on its own, in any medium. The original Golden Age posters that have been archived and collected can command a hefty but worthy price. While various curators and dealers have their own pricing model, some collectors are willing to pay thousands of dollars to hold a piece of Ghanaian video club history. Dealer Brian Chankin recalls, "I know that other people have sold these posters for upwards of $50,000. Anything from the 1980s is just incredibly scarce and hard to find at this point." Many of these scarce original posters now belong to celebrities, including featured faces like Schwarzenegger, Stallone, Tarantino, and others. Chankin says, "A lot of my own clients have been people in the tattoo community. Action Bronson's bought a number over the years. It's been a surprising variety of clients." The collector's market's most popular content, however, is less of a surprise. The most requested posters are from the big 1980s action blockbusters that made the posters famous. Predator, Terminator, anything with Kurt Russell or Van Damme, said Chankin, adding, "But horror is arguably the most popular genre." Traveling galleries from non-Ghanaian collectors and dealers like Ernie Wolf and Karun Thakar contain many of the last remaining original posters. Past exhibitions have been held in venues across the world, including in Hong Kong, New York, Los Angeles, Chicago, and beyond. But there are also dealers who work directly with the original and remaining artists in Ghana ensuring proceeds and credit goes directly to the artists who created and continue to create these artworks. Brian Chankin, the owner of Odd Obsession Movies, a classic video store in Chicago, developed a deep love of Ghanaian movie posters and began collaborating directly with Ghanaian artists in 2015. Today, Chankin and his business partner, Robert Kofi, own Deadly Prey Gallery, a Chicago-based studio that works directly with Ghanaian artists, selling prints of classic posters and coordinating commissions for new works of art. Proceeds of prints and commissions are shared directly with the artists who create them, so cinephiles all over the world can finally, ethically and fairly, collect, curate, and commission some of Ghana's most distinctive and celebrated art for themselves. But beware, warns Chankin, because bootlegs abound. For example, he says, if you want to find an original Star Wars poster, you can't. There were almost no VHS tapes of the original movies in Ghana because they had encoded copy protection and were almost impossible to bootleg. Many Golden Age artists taking commissions decades later still paint for films they may have not seen. In many ways, this makes perfect sense, keeping the X factor of inspiration above plot fidelity in terms of artistic priority. These modern poster commissions can be solicited from dealers, and some artists offer direct commission requests through their social media presences as well. But as with all commission-based art, prices are, justifiably, at the artist's discretion, which in some cases can span anywhere from 3 to 6 figures. Today, while Ghana has become a global beacon of political progress, economic growth, and cultural creativity, Ghanaian movie posters have become an internet sensation, at the cost of becoming almost mimetic. While many authentic admirers exist, commentators from Redditors to Conan O'Brien have lent the internet their own editorial take on the art form by playfully or overtly ridiculing the poster's most iconic elements like plot fidelity, anatomical exaggeration, and portrayals of violence. Brian Chankin says one duty of being a collector, dealer, and online voice for the artists is working against the colonialist knee-jerk reaction of, quote, "Oh, these are so stupid." They're not. There's a deep, rich history to this, and you're not getting it. Infamous American art critic Dave Hickey in Extreme Canvas 2 says that the Ghanaian movie poster's aesthetic represents, quote, Africa's revenge against Picasso and the primitivo fads of early modernism. The book states, in an age when posters coming out of Hollywood are bland and forgettable, the rough-hewn style of these posters is a real joy. It's movie art with a pulse. Film professor Chris Cooling states, remember that the 1980s was a great era of American action films, often featuring actors who became huge movie stars by going to the gym more than acting class. Sylvester Stallone, Arnold Schwarzenegger, Jean-Claude Van Damme, Steven Seagal, Dolph Lundgren, Mr. T, Carl Weathers. Their bodies alone are larger than life. And what's more Hollywood than adding a little extra Hulk to the hero? Culturally, the energy and joy of these posters have even further reaching effects. Ernie Wolf describes, their handmade artistry stood its ground against the inevitable tide of printing technology that globalization thrust upon them, and for a short while, carved out a small oasis in time where man won out over machines. Now that would make any Terminator fan proud. At Robert Kofi's gallery in Accra, people frequently drop by to look at the posters and go on a nostalgia trip. Visitors always go, wow, do these posters still exist? Kofi says. They're so happy to see them, and they thank me for keeping the art form alive. But most importantly, what do the artists have to say? Poster artist Mr. Nana remembers, those video clubs created a lot of employment for the artists and the communities where they operated. It was a good feeling to see your posters travel across the country. Painter Heavy J says, the days of the video club bring a lot of fond memories, like having free entry to watch every movie of your choice, and the fame and popularity I gained promoting films across the country. It also brought a lot of happiness to the youth at the time. Seeing my posters being sold as artworks is a dream come true. And even though I've done a lot of posters, I think my best work is yet to come. We paint to entertain people, regardless of how dull the movie is, he says. So the question is simple. Are you not entertained?